The fire station sits quiet in the late afternoon sun, a brick monument to order in a world that's anything but. I park my sedan in the visitor's spot, killing the engine with a practiced twist that feels like putting an old dog to sleep. The place smells of diesel and floor polish when I push through the glass doors, the comforting scent of emergency kept on a tight leash. I'm not here for a fire, though. I'm here because David Chen called, and 20 years of friendship means you show up when a man's voice cracks like that over the phone. The station is half empty, most of the crew out on a call. My footsteps echo against the polished concrete floor, announcing my presence before I can spot David. A red truck gleams under fluorescent lights, its surfaces so clean I can almost see my reflection. A worn face that's seen too many tragedies and solved too few. Ray. David's voice comes from behind me, solid and familiar like the foundation of a house you once lived in. Thanks for coming. I turn to find him standing in the doorway to the break room, still in uniform minus the jacket. The lines around his eyes have deepened since I saw him last, and his shoulders carry the weight of something heavier than his firefighter gear. He's aged in ways that have nothing to do with time. Been a while, I say, extending my hand. His grip is firm but distracted, the handshake of a man going through motions while his mind wrestles with bigger problems. Your message said it was important. David's eyes dart toward the few remaining firefighters, then back to me. Let's talk in my office. I follow him down a narrow hallway lined with framed citations and team photos. His office is small but neat. A metal desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the station's back lot. He closes the door behind us, then hesitates before taking his seat, as if deciding whether sitting will make this conversation more or less difficult. Coffee? He offers, gesturing to a pot on a side table. I'm fine, I say, settling into the chair across from him. What's this about, Dave? He runs a hand through his hair, shorter than when we were rookies together, him in the fire academy, me at the police department. It's about Toby, my son, the one with autism? I ask, recalling fragments of conversations over the years. A boy who struggled with social connections but could calculate complex equations in his head. A special kid. A tough road. Yeah? David nods, then opens a drawer and pulls out a folder. And it's about these fires we've been having. The folder lands on the desk between us with a soft thud. I don't open it yet. 3 commercial buildings in the last month, he continues, all ruled suspicious, possible arson. I know about the fires. It's hard not to in a town this size. An abandoned warehouse, an insurance office after hours, and a storage facility on the edge of town. No casualties, but substantial property damage. The kind of case that interests insurance companies more than detectives like me, who prefer working with flesh and blood rather than charred beams and smoke damage. I'm not with the department anymore, Dave, I remind him. If you've got information on the fires, you should talk to— This isn't for the department, he interrupts, leaning forward. This is— His voice falters, and I see the crack in his professional facade, the father beneath the firefighter's uniform. It's about Toby. He's seeing things in these fires that nobody else can see. My expression must betray my skepticism because David's face hardens slightly. Not visions, Ray. Patterns. Mathematical patterns. His fingers drum a nervous rhythm on the desk. You know he's always been good with numbers, but this is different. I flip open the folder, finding fire inspection reports, photographs of burn patterns, and pages of numbers, equations, and geometric shapes, drawn in a child's careful hand. He says the fires aren't random, David continues, that they follow a sequence only he can see. Colors and numbers that form a pattern pointing to the next target. My hands are cold, despite the warmth of the room. I've seen enough desperate parents to recognize when someone is reaching for meaning in tragedy, but I've also known David Chen long enough to know he doesn't bend reality to suit his needs. "Dave," I say carefully, "kids with autism often find patterns where—" "Don't." The word comes out sharp, a command rather than a plea. "Don't tell me what my son sees or doesn't see. Just look at the evidence." He pulls out one of the drawings, pointing to a series of numbers and colored shapes. Toby predicted the third fire location before it happened. I didn't believe him at first, thought it was just his obsession with numbers. Then I got the call at 2 a.m. to respond to the exact address he'd circled in red. I study the paper more carefully, feeling the familiar tingle at the base of my skull, the detective's sixth sense that something doesn't add up. "Why come to me?" I ask, looking up from the drawings. "Why not the fire investigator or the police?" David laughs, a hollow sound that contains no humor. "And tell them what? That my autistic son sees fires as colored numbers? That he's having some kind of mathematical visions?" He shakes his head. "They'd either ignore me completely or worse, think Toby's involved somehow. He's not wrong. The world rarely understands people who see differently, especially when their vision touches on crime. I need someone who will actually listen," he continues, his voice dropping. "Someone who's seen enough strange things to know that sometimes the impossible is just the improbable in disguise." His eyes meet mine. "And I need someone Toby might trust. He doesn't connect with people easily." The weight of the request settles on my shoulders. I've been chasing normal cases for years now: insurance fraud, cheating spouses, missing persons who want to stay missing. Nothing that brushes against the unexplainable or extraordinary. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this, Dave," I say, even as something in me stirs at the challenge. "Remember the Bridges case?" David asks quietly. I feel a warmth in my chest, an uncomfortable heat that I recognize as guilt. The Bridges case, a family of 4 killed in a house fire 15 years ago. Ruled an accident officially, but I never believed it. Never proved otherwise either. "That was different," I mutter. "Was it?" David leans back in his chair. "You always said the evidence didn't add up, that there was a pattern you couldn't quite see." He's playing me like a well-tuned instrument, plucking at the strings of my old obsessions. And it's working. "I need you to meet him, Ray," David says, his voice softening. "Just talk to Toby, see what he shows you, then decide if I'm a desperate father or if there's something here worth investigating." I close the folder and tap my fingers against it, weighing my options. The rational part of me says to walk away. The part that spent decades looking for patterns in chaos wants to see what the boy sees. "All right," I finally say, tucking the folder under my arm. "I'll meet your son." Relief washes over David's face, momentarily erasing the worry lines. "Thank you," he says, and I hear the father behind the firefighter, the friend behind the professional. "Don't thank me yet," I warn him. "I haven't agreed to anything more than a conversation." But as I walk back through the quiet fire station, the folder heavy under my arm, I know I've already stepped into whatever pattern is forming around us. Some threads you can't help but follow, even when you can't see where they lead. The Chen house sits at the end of a quiet suburban street, all tidy landscaping and modest practicality. David opens the door before I can knock, his firefighter's instinct for timing still intact. The house smells of coffee and something else, the faint chemical scent of dry erase markers and the subtle musk of books. David's eyes flick nervously between me and the staircase. "He's in his room," he says. "I told him you were coming, but—" He leaves the sentence hanging, a father navigating the space between preparation and apology. "It's fine," I say, though I'm not sure it is. Children have never been my specialty, let alone children who see mathematical patterns in arson cases. David leads me upstairs, his footsteps deliberately heavy, announcing our approach. Toby prefers knowing who's coming, he explains in a low voice. Surprises are difficult. We stop at a door marked with a hand-drawn periodic table, each element rendered in precise, vibrant colors. David knocks twice, pauses, then 3 times more, a code between them. "Come in," says a soft voice from inside. The room that greets me is unlike any child's bedroom I've ever seen. No posters of sports heroes or movie characters. Instead, the walls are covered with numbers, equations, sequences, and geometric shapes drawn directly onto the paint in a rainbow of dry erase markers. A large whiteboard dominates one wall, filled with what looks like calculus, far beyond middle school level. The floor is visible only in carefully measured pathways between stacks of notebooks, each labeled with dates and color-coded tabs. In the center of this numerical universe sits Toby Chen, cross-legged on a blue rug patterned with the golden spiral. He's small for 12, with dark hair that falls across his forehead and glasses that magnify eyes too serious for his age. He doesn't look up when we enter, his attention fixed on the notebook in his lap, pencil moving in quick, decisive strokes. "Toby," David says gently, "this is Mr. Marshall, the detective I told you about." "Ray," I correct, stepping carefully into the room. "Just Ray is fine." Toby continues drawing for exactly 5 more seconds before setting his pencil down with mathematical precision. "You were a detective," he says, still not looking directly at me. "Now you're a private investigator. Different parameters." His voice is flat, but not emotionless, more like someone focusing so intently on the accuracy of his words that inflection becomes secondary. "That's right," I say, surprised. "How did you know?" Dad said, "Former detective," on the phone. Logical conclusion. He gestures to a chair by his desk, the movement efficient and economical. "You can sit there, it's stable." I take the offered seat, noticing how everything in this room has its place. Even the apparent chaos of papers has an underlying order, like the careful arrangement of a complex equation. "Your dad tells me you've noticed something about the recent fires," I begin, keeping my voice neutral. Toby's fingers tap a rhythm against his notebook. Not nervousness, I realize, but counting. 3 fires so far. Most people see 3 random points. I see the beginning of a sequence. He finally looks up, not quite at my face, but somewhere around my left shoulder. His eyes are dark and intelligent, carrying a focus that seems to bore through surfaces to the patterns underneath. "Can you tell me about this sequence?" I ask. Instead of answering directly, Toby rises and moves to one of his stacks of notebooks. His movements are careful, deliberate, as though he's mapping his trajectory through the room before taking each step. He selects a green notebook and returns to his spot on the rug. "When I see numbers, they have colors," he explains, opening the notebook. "When I see events with mathematical properties, they have colors too. The first fire was blue 7. I glance at David, who stands silently by the door. He gives me a small nod, a request for patience. "Blue 7, I repeat. "What does that mean?" "7 is blue," Toby says, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. "The fire happened on the 7th day of the month. The address adds up to 16, which reduces to 7. The building had 7 major support beams." His fingers trace a diagram in his notebook. The burn pattern focused on structural weaknesses that created a 7-point star. He flips the page, revealing a detailed drawing of the warehouse floor plan, with burn patterns highlighted in blue pencil. It matches the fire investigator's report I'd seen in David's folder, but with additional notes and measurements no official report would include. "The second fire was red 3, Toby continues. Third day of the week. Address sums to 12, which reduces to 3. 3 main ignition points. Another page turn, another detailed rendering. But the pattern wasn't just about each fire individually, it's about how they connect. He moves to the whiteboard and begins drawing, his hand moving with the confidence of a seasoned mathematician. Lines connect points representing the fire locations, creating geometric shapes I don't immediately recognize. If you apply the Fibonacci sequence to the geographical coordinates and factor in the temporal spacing, his voice takes on a subtle animation now, the only hint of excitement in his otherwise measured speech. The fires form a spiral, not just any spiral, a golden ratio spiral adjusting for urban grid constraints. I lean forward, studying the board. I'm no mathematician, but I see what he means. The 3 points do seem to follow a curved path when connected. "And you think this predicts where the next fire will be?" I ask. Toby stops drawing and turns to face me, his gaze now fixed somewhere near my chin. "I don't think. I know." There's no arrogance in his voice, just the same factual certainty with which he might state that water is wet. The pattern is as clear to me as sheet music would be to a composer. Each fire is a note in a sequence, a movement in a larger composition. He returns to his notebook, flipping to a fresh page covered in concentric circles, each labeled with coordinates and dates. At the center is a location marked in vivid red. "The 4th fire will be here," he says, pointing to the center. "In 5 days. Red 3 again, but deeper, more intense." I study the location, an address in the commercial district downtown. My skepticism hasn't vanished, but it's eroding in the face of Toby's precise logic and the meticulous evidence spread throughout the room. "Some people think I'm making things up," Toby says quietly, his eyes now fixed on his notebook. "Or that I'm seeing patterns because my brain works differently. But the patterns are real. They're not just in my head, they're in the world. The fires aren't random. They're a symphony of colors and rhythms that only make sense when you see all the notes at once." David steps forward. "Show him the prediction, Toby." The boy hesitates, then pulls a sealed envelope from between the pages of his notebook and hands it to me. "I wrote this 2 weeks ago," he says, "before the 3rd fire." I open it carefully. Inside is a sheet of paper with an address, date, and time, along with a detailed description of where the fire would start and how it would spread. The address matches the location of the storage facility that burned 3 days ago. "Your dad could have written this after the fact," I point out gently. "Check the postmark," David says from the doorway. I turn the envelope over and see it. Postmarked 16 days ago, addressed to David at the fire station. The boy had mailed his prediction to create an undeniable timestamp. "I need you to believe me," Toby says, his voice suddenly smaller, more childlike. "Not because I want to be right, but because people will get hurt if the pattern continues." Our eyes meet briefly, a rare, direct gaze that seems to require enormous effort on his part. In that moment, I see beyond the numbers and patterns to the boy underneath, carrying a burden no child should have to bear. "I believe you're seeing something real, Toby," I say, choosing my words carefully. "And I want to understand it better." Relief flickers across his face, gone almost before I can register it. He nods once, then returns to his notebook. Our meeting is over. I can tell from the way his attention refocuses on the page, his mind already moving on to the next calculation, the next pattern. As David leads me back downstairs, I glance over my shoulder at the room full of numbers and the boy sitting at their center, a translator of a language only he can fully comprehend. Night settles over my office like an old debt, familiar, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. The lamp on my desk casts more shadows than light, turning the stack of police files into a mountain range of secrets and half-truths. I've called in favors to get these files, Arson reports that a private investigator has no business possessing. Old habits, old connections. The bourbon in my glass catches the light. Amber warnings I choose to ignore as I spread the fire investigation photos across my desk. Outside, rain taps against the window, nature's Morse code spelling out warnings I can't quite translate. Across from me, Toby sits cross-legged on the worn leather couch, his back straight as a ruler, head bent over a notebook. David had been reluctant to leave him here, but Toby himself had insisted with that direct, uncompromising logic of his. "I need to see all the files together," he'd said. "Your office doesn't have enough space. Mr. Marshall's will work better. The lighting is appropriate for pattern recognition." So here we are, an aging detective and a mathematical prodigy, surrounded by evidence of destruction, looking for order in the ashes. I study the photos from the warehouse fire, the first in the sequence according to Toby. The burn patterns radiate from structural points like dark stars, forming the seven-pointed shape Toby had drawn in his notebook. The official report cites faulty wiring as the probable cause, though the investigator notes suspicious circumstances without elaboration. I've known enough fire investigators to read between the lines. They suspect arson, but can't prove it. The second fire, the insurance office, shows a different pattern. 3 distinct points of origin, just as Toby described. The damage is more contained but more precise, focused on the records room and the main server. The report suggests a professional job, someone who knew exactly what they wanted to destroy. The third fire, the storage facility, is the most recent and the most troubling. The flames had spread in a perfect spiral, consuming everything in their path with mathematical precision. The investigators are baffled by the burn pattern, unable to determine how such a controlled burn was achieved. 3 fires, each more calculated than the last, each fitting perfectly into Toby's pattern. My gaze drifts to a separate file, older and worn at the edges from years of handling. I shouldn't have it. It's an official police file on a closed case. But some cases never close in a detective's mind. The label reads simply, Bridges, 2008. I open it, though I know every photograph and report by heart. A family of 4 burned beyond recognition in what was officially ruled a tragic accident. Father, mother, 2 children, the youngest just 4 years old. The fire had started in the kitchen, spreading with unusual speed through the modest home. By the time the fire department arrived, the structure was fully engulfed. But I never believed it was an accident. The burn patterns were too precise, the timing too convenient. Jacob Bridges had been scheduled to testify in a fraud case the following week, a case involving a local insurance company with powerful connections. The official investigation found no evidence of foul play, and my concerns were dismissed as the obsession of a detective too emotionally involved in his cases. Eventually, I'd been forced to drop it. The case went cold. The insurance company flourished, and I carried the weight of 4 unavenged lives like stones in my pockets. I look up at Toby, who's now surrounded by papers covered in complex equations and colorful geometric shapes. His pencil moves with certainty, each line and number placed with absolute precision. There's no hesitation in his movements, no doubt. "You think these fires are connected to the Bridges case?" he says without looking up. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I straighten in my chair, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "Your respiration changed when you opened that file. Your pupils dilated. The file is older than the others, but you handle it more carefully." His pencil continues its dance across the paper. Also, the Bridges fire fits the same mathematical signature as these new ones, though the execution was less refined. Our eyes meet briefly, his gaze direct for once, then quickly averted back to his work. The hair on the back of my neck stands up. I hadn't shown him the Bridges file, hadn't mentioned it at all. "How could you know that?" I ask, my voice rougher than intended. Toby sets down his pencil and turns his notebook toward me. On the page is a perfect rendering of the Bridges house floor plan, with burn patterns mapped in precise detail, details that match the investigation photos exactly. "I didn't know it until now," he says, "but when I saw these new fires, I started researching similar patterns in past cases. The Bridges fire came up in old news reports. The official photos weren't available, but I could extrapolate the burn pattern from witness descriptions and building codes from that period." He taps the drawing with his finger. "The mathematical signature is unmistakable. Same composer, earlier work. The implications send a chill through me that has nothing to do with the rain-cooled air seeping through the old window frames. If Toby is right, if these fires share the same signature as the Bridges fire, then someone has been operating undetected for 15 years. Someone who turns arson into a precise, calculated art form." "The pattern is accelerating," Toby says, returning to his calculations. "The first 3 fires established the baseline. The next will intensify the sequence." "The location you predicted and downtown," I say, reaching for my bourbon and finding it untouched. "What's there?" "Bennett Insurance Group headquarters," Toby replies without hesitation. 16th floor, specifically, based on the progression of the sequence. The name hits me like a slap. Bennett Insurance, the same company involved in the case Jacob Bridges was set to testify in. The same company that benefited from his silence. "That can't be coincidence," I mutter, more to myself than to Toby. "Statistically unlikely," he agrees, his fingers drumming a quick pattern on his notebook. "The probability of random correlation is approximately 0.037%. My skepticism hasn't vanished entirely. Decades of detective work have hardened it into something approaching permanence, but it's receding rapidly in the face of too many connections to dismiss. I want to believe this is all mathematical pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns where none exist. But the evidence keeps stacking up, forming its own undeniable pattern. Toby's pencil moves faster now, filling page after page with numbers and shapes that form a language I can barely comprehend. The rain intensifies outside, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. In the dim light, Toby's face takes on an otherworldly quality, half child, half oracle, revealing truths hidden in plain sight. "The next fire is different," he says suddenly, his voice quiet but urgent. "The previous fires destroyed property, records, evidence. The next one—" He looks up, his dark eyes troubled behind his glasses. "The next one will have people in it." His words hang in the air between us, heavy with implication. He returns to his notebook, adding a final equation to his work, then carefully tears out the page and hands it to me. It's a map of the Bennett Insurance Building with a red circle marking the 16th floor. Around the circle he's written a sequence of numbers and times, culminating in a date 5 days from now. "How sure are you?" I ask, studying the page. "As sure as mathematics," he replies, and there's something in his voice, a tremor of emotion breaking through his usual measured tone, that convinces me more than any evidence could. I fold the page carefully and tuck it into my pocket. The Bridges family has waited 15 years for justice. If there's even a chance Toby's right, that the same people responsible for their deaths are planning another fire, I can't ignore it. Won't ignore it. "I'll need everything you've got on this," I tell him, gesturing to his notebooks. "Every calculation, every pattern, every prediction." Toby nods, already gathering his materials with methodical efficiency. His movements are precise but quicker now, driven by the same urgency I feel building in my chest. The rain continues its assault on the windows, and the bourbon sits forgotten on my desk as we work into the night, piecing together a pattern of fire and deception that stretches back 15 years. Somewhere in the city, someone is planning their next masterpiece of destruction. They don't know yet that their mathematical signature has been decoded, their pattern revealed by a boy who sees numbers as colors and rhythms. For the first time in years, I feel the old fire rekindling in my chest, not the destructive kind that consumes and destroys, but the kind that fuels pursuit and illuminates truth. The kind that might finally bring justice for the Bridges family and stop whatever is coming next. The storage facility looks like a jaw of broken teeth against the pale morning sky, blackened beams jutting up from the collapsed roof. Yellow police tape flutters in the wind, a half-hearted warning to stay away. I park my sedan a block over, behind an abandoned gas station where the security cameras went dark years ago. Toby sits beside me, his fingers tapping a rhythm on his knees. Not anxiety, I realize, but counting. Always counting. The world to him is numbers and patterns, and this burned-out husk before us is a mathematical puzzle waiting to be solved. Official investigators won't be back until 9, I tell him, checking my watch. Gives us about 40 minutes. We're not supposed to be here, so if anyone shows up, we leave immediately, Toby finishes, his gaze fixed on the building. Dad explained the legal implications of trespassing on an active crime scene, Section 602 of the Penal Code. I nod, a smile tugging at my lips despite the grim surroundings. The kid memorizes laws the way other children memorize baseball statistics. You remember what to do if anyone asks why we're here? Toby adjusts his glasses with mathematical precision. I'm your nephew. We're looking for Unit 23B because my mother stored family photos there before the fire. We're hoping some survived. Good, I say, impressed by his recall. Let's go. We cross the empty lot. Morning dew soaking into my shoes. The smell hits me first, that distinctive blend of wet ash, melted plastic, and chemical extinguishers that lingers for days after a fire. I've smelled it at countless crime scenes, but it never gets easier. It's the scent of endings, of things that can't be undone. Toby wrinkles his nose but doesn't complain. He steps carefully around puddles of dirty water, his eyes scanning the ground, the walls, the charred support beams, taking in everything with that laser focus of his. We duck under the police tape at a spot where it sags between posts. The interior of the facility is a landscape of destruction, rows of storage units transformed into hollow, blackened shells. Water from the firefighters' hoses still pools in depressions on the concrete floor, reflecting the broken ceiling in dark mirrors. The official report says it started here, I say, pointing to what remains of a central unit. Spread outward in what they're calling an unusual pattern. Toby doesn't respond. His body has gone completely still, except for his eyes, which dart from point to point across the burned space. His breathing quickens, and I recognize the signs of sensory overload that David warned me about. Toby, I say quietly, we can leave if this is too much. He shakes his head sharply. No, I need to see it all. His voice has changed, tighter, more focused. It's clearer here than in the photos, much clearer. He moves deeper into the structure, stepping with surprising confidence through the debris. I follow, watching as he stops at seemingly random points, tilting his head as though listening to something I can't hear. The fire investigator saw 3 points of origin, Toby says, pointing to charred areas, but there were 7. The other 4 were disguised within the primary burn patterns. He moves to the center of the space. They form a heptagon, perfect angular symmetry adjusting for structural variables. His hands begin to trace shapes in the air, connecting invisible dots that only he can see. Blue 7 at the warehouse, red 3 at the insurance office. And here is gold 5. Gold 5? I echo, trying to follow his logic. 5 is always gold, he explains, as if stating that water is wet. 5 points in the pentagram pattern of the accelerant placement. 5 hours from ignition to discovery. 5 major structural supports targeted for maximum collateral spread. He's moving faster now, almost dancing between points in the burned-out space, his voice rising with excitement or distress. I can't tell which. The spiral continues, he says, his words tumbling out faster. Not just geographical locations, but mathematical signatures within each location, spirals within spirals, fractals, self-replicating patterns that fold back on themselves. His hands shake as he pulls a notebook from his pocket and begins sketching furiously. The bridge's fire was the origin point, first iteration. Imperfect but foundational, these new fires are refinements of that original algorithm. But why? Why return to it after 15 years? I move closer, watching as his pencil maps the warehouse floor plan with uncanny accuracy, adding symbols and numbers that mean nothing to me, but clearly form a coherent language to him. There, he says suddenly, pointing to a corner where the roof has partially collapsed. That's not right. I follow him to the spot, where he kneels beside a pile of debris. With careful movements, he brushes aside a layer of ash to reveal a small patch of flooring that seems less damaged than its surroundings. The pattern is interrupted here, he explains, a deliberate break in the sequence. I crouch beside him, pulling a penlight from my pocket. The beam reveals what looks like a protective coating on a small section of concrete, a fire-retardant material applied before the blaze. They wanted to preserve something, I murmur, examining the area more closely. Toby nods, his eyes wide behind his glasses. A signature within the signature. Look, he points to barely visible marks in the concrete. I lean closer, focusing my light. Letters and numbers etched shallowly into the surface and deliberately protected from the fire. BIG 16523, Bennett Insurance Group, I translate, feeling a chill that has nothing to do with the morning air. 16th floor, May 23rd. Today's date is May 18th, 5 days before the predicted fire at Bennett headquarters. It's confirmation, Toby whispers, his voice trembling slightly. The pattern is correct. The target is correct. The date is correct. He suddenly backs away from the marked spot, his hands pressed against his temples. It's too loud, he gasps. Too many numbers all at once. I recognize the signs of sensory overload that David described. Toby's brain processing too much information without the filters most people have. I move to his side, careful not to touch him without permission. Focus on my voice, I say quietly. Just one thing at a time. His breathing comes in quick gasps, his eyes squeezed shut. 7 blue, 3 red, 5 gold, 16 black, he chants, the words running together. The sequence is accelerating. The next fire isn't just property damage, it's... He stops abruptly, his eyes flying open. Someone's coming. I hear it a moment later. The crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of a car door. I tuck my penlight away and help Toby to his feet. This way, I whisper, guiding him toward a side exit I noticed earlier. Quick and quiet. We slip out just as voices echo through the main entrance. Morning shift investigators arriving early. Toby clutches his notebook to his chest as we hurry back to my car, his face pale but determined. We need to talk to Detective Lopez, he says as we pull away from the scene. The evidence is physical now, not just mathematical. They'll have to believe us. I nod, though I'm not nearly as confident. The police department has a way of seeing only what fits their existing theories. But Toby's right. We have something concrete now, a prediction, a date, a target, and only 5 days to stop whatever is coming. The interrogation room at the police station has that particular shade of green that institutions love, the color of resignation dressed up as calm. Detective Sarah Lopez sits across from us, her short brown hair precision cut, her eyes sharp as broken glass. She hasn't touched the file I pushed across the table 5 minutes ago. Instead, she studies Toby with the measured gaze of someone who's built a career on separating facts from fantasies. I can almost see the assessment happening behind those eyes. 12-year-old boy, autism spectrum, possible savant abilities, probable overactive imagination. The kind of witness most detectives would thank politely, then promptly forget. "I appreciate you meeting with us," I say, breaking the silence. Not many detectives would. "You left me 17 messages in 4 hours, Marshal," Lopez replies, her voice professionally neutral. "It seemed more efficient to hear you out than to keep screening your calls." She finally slides the file closer, flipping it open with a practiced flick. "So you're telling me this boy can predict arson targets through mathematics?" Toby sits beside me, back straight, eyes fixed on a point just above Lopez's left shoulder. His fingers tap silent equations on his thighs. "His name is Toby," I correct her. "And yes, he's identified a pattern in the recent fires that points to a specific target. Bennett Insurance Group headquarters, 5 days from now." Lopez's expression doesn't change, but something in her posture shifts subtly. The minute tightening of shoulders that happens when a cop smells trouble brewing. "And you discovered this pattern how exactly?" I push a photograph across the table, the etched markings we found at the storage facility. This was deliberately protected from the fire. BIG 16523, Bennett Insurance Group, 16th floor, May 23rd. Lopez examines the photo, her face professionally blank. "Could be anything. Tenant's inventory code, construction marking. Hell, could be random graffiti that happened to survive. It corresponds exactly with the pattern Toby identified before we even visited the site," I counter. "And there's more." I spread out copies of Toby's notebooks, showing the mathematical relationships between the 3 fire locations. "These fires aren't random targets. They're connected, to each other and to the Bennett Insurance Group. And possibly to the Bridges fire from 15 years ago," I add, sliding another file forward. This gets a reaction, a slight narrowing of her eyes. The Bridges case is still remembered in the department, an unsolved tragedy that haunts the older detectives. "That's a stretch, Marshal. You've been trying to connect dots on that case for years." "The mathematical signature matches," Toby interjects, suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. "Scaled by a factor of 1.618, adjusted for improved technique, but fundamentally the same algorithm." Lopez's attention shifts fully to Toby now. "And you can see this algorithm?" "Yes." Simple, direct. The way Toby always answers questions when he's certain. "In colors," I add. Lopez leans back, the chair creaking under her weight. Her lips form that perpetually crooked line of disinterest that experienced detectives perfect. A mask hiding whatever she's really thinking. "Mr. Marshall, I respect your background, but you're asking me to allocate resources based on a child's mathematical visions and some marks on concrete that could mean anything." Toby's fingers stop their tapping. His breathing quickens slightly. I recognize the signs. He's processing something, making connections at a speed that leaves the rest of us stumbling behind. "The first 3 fires targeted records," he says abruptly. "The warehouse contained archived financial documents from 6 companies, including Bennett subsidiaries. The insurance office held policy records for high-value commercial properties. The storage facility contained backup servers for 3 accounting firms." He pauses, blinking rapidly. "They weren't destroying property. They were destroying evidence," Lopez's professional mask slips for just a moment. Surprise quickly controlled. How could you possibly know what was stored in those locations? I researched tenant records, Toby replies. Public information. The pattern only makes sense if the targets were selected for information destruction. I hadn't known this detail either. Toby has been doing his own research, following threads I didn't even know existed. Lopez taps her pen against the table. Once, twice. And Bennett Insurance? What's stored on the 16th floor that fits this pattern? The executive suite, Toby answers immediately. The financial compliance division, and most importantly, the secure records room containing physical documentation of all high-value claims settlements for the past 20 years. His voice takes on a distant quality, as if reading from an internal database. Including the Bridges family insurance settlement. Lopez sets her pen down carefully. That's not public information. No, Toby agrees, but the building's architectural plans are, and the company's organizational chart is in their annual report. The rest is mathematical probability based on standard corporate security protocols. The room falls silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Lopez studies Toby with new intensity, reassessing. The next fire will start in the northeast corner of the 16th floor, Toby continues, his words coming faster now, between 11:37 p.m. and 11:42 p.m. on May 23rd. It will target the records room first, then spread in a controlled pattern to maximize destruction while minimizing structural damage to the building itself. He looks directly at Lopez for the first time. There will be 3 security guards on duty, 2 on the ground floor, 1 making rounds. The pattern suggests they aren't intended targets, but if the timing is miscalculated... He trails off, and I see genuine distress in his eyes. Not the abstract concern of a puzzle solver, but real fear for human lives. Lopez leans forward, her skepticism not gone, but tempered now with professional interest. That's awfully specific, Toby. How can you be so sure about these details? The pattern is precise, he says simply. The variables resolve to only one possible outcome. Unless we intervene, I add quietly. Lopez turns her attention back to me. Let's say I'm willing to entertain this theory. What's the connection to the Bridges fire? Why come back to that after 15 years? Jacob Bridges was set to testify in a fraud case against Bennett Insurance, I explain, feeling the familiar heat of an old obsession rekindling. The fire was ruled accidental, but if it wasn't, then someone at Bennett orchestrated a murder to silence a witness, Lopez finishes, her professional detachment slipping further. And now they're tying up loose ends. The statute of limitations on fraud would have expired, I say. They could be preparing to destroy evidence of more recent crimes before it comes to light. Lopez studies the files again, her expression unreadable. Toby's hands have resumed their silent calculations, his eyes distant as he processes variables only he can see. After what feels like an eternity, Lopez closes the file and stands. I can't get a warrant based on mathematical patterns and a marking that could mean anything. You know that. My heart sinks, but I expected this. Police work requires evidence that holds up in court, not the intuitions of a 12-year-old savant, no matter how precise. But, she continues, surprising me, I can look into Bennett Insurance, check if there are any active investigations, any whispers of irregularities. She fixes me with a stern gaze. Quietly, unofficially. If I find something concrete, then maybe we can talk about surveillance on the building. It's more than I expected, less than I hoped for. But it's a start. Thank you, I say, gathering our materials. Toby looks up at Lopez, his gaze direct and unsettling in its intensity. 3 days, he says. After that, the variables become too numerous to calculate reliable interventions. Lopez studies him for a long moment, professional skepticism wrestling with something else. A reluctant recognition, perhaps, that some things can't be explained by conventional investigation. "I'll call you tomorrow," she says finally. "But Marshall," her eyes narrow slightly, "keep this boy out of harm's way. Whatever's going on, don't make him a target, too." As we leave the station, I feel the weight of her warning settle between my shoulder blades. Toby walks silently beside me, his mind still processing patterns that the rest of us can't see, carrying a burden that no child should have to bear. The Chen house glows like a solitary lighthouse in the darkness, windows illuminated against the midnight sky. I sit in my car for a moment, gathering my thoughts, rehearsing arguments that I know will fall apart the moment David Chen opens his door. He called me 20 minutes ago, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We need to talk. Now." 3 years as a firefighter's son has taught Toby to sleep through sirens, but I still find myself closing my car door with unusual gentleness as I approach the house, as if the conversation ahead might somehow be less painful if I arrive quietly. David opens the door before I can knock, silhouetted against the warm light of the entryway. His face is a landscape of exhaustion and worry, the lines around his eyes deeper than they were just days ago. He doesn't speak, just steps aside to let me in. The living room is meticulously neat, everything in its place, a sanctuary of order that David maintains for Toby's sake. On the coffee table sits a mug of something that stopped steaming long ago. Next to it, Toby's green notebook, open to pages filled with complex equations. "He finally fell asleep an hour ago," David says, his voice low but edged with tension, after working himself into a near meltdown with those calculations. I stand awkwardly in the center of the room, feeling like an intruder. "Lopez is looking into Bennett Insurance. We might actually have a chance to." "I saw the photos from the storage facility," David interrupts, picking up the notebook. "You took my son to an active crime scene." The accusation hangs between us, heavy as smoke. "He insisted," I say, knowing how weak it sounds. "He said the patterns would be clearer if he could see the site firsthand. He's 12 years old, Ray. He doesn't make those decisions. You do. I do." David's control slips, his voice rising slightly before he catches himself, glancing toward the stairs. "I trusted you to keep him safe, not drag him deeper into this." I take a seat on the couch, trying to look calmer than I feel. "We were careful. No one saw us. That's not the point." David paces the length of the living room, a caged energy in his movements that reminds me of his son. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to him?" He's not sleeping. When he does, he has nightmares about fires and numbers that won't stop multiplying. He's skipping meals because he can't break away from those calculations. His therapist called me today, concerned about his regression. The guilt I've been suppressing rises to the surface, an uncomfortable heat in my chest. "I'm sorry, Dave. I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," he cuts me off, "because you're seeing him as a tool to solve your case. I'm seeing him as my son who's falling apart. The accusation stings because there's truth in it. I have been treating Toby like an asset, a remarkable, brilliant asset, but still a means to an end. The end being justice, but justice won't mean much if it comes at the cost of a child's well-being. You're right, I admit. I got caught up in the investigation. But Dave, what he's discovered, it's real. We found physical evidence today that confirms his predictions." David sits heavily in the armchair across from me, the fight momentarily draining from his posture. "I know it's real. That's what terrifies me." He runs a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Toby's it makes my chest tighten. "Do you remember when he was 8? The fever?" I nod. I wasn't close to the family then, but I remember David calling me from the hospital, panic stripping his voice to the bone. 105.3, David says, reciting the number with terrible precision. "That's how high his fever got before they could bring it down. The doctors told me to prepare for brain damage. Instead, he woke up seeing numbers as colors and patterns everywhere." His voice catches. "They called it a gift, a neurological reorganization that enhanced certain cognitive functions." He leans forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on me. "But it nearly killed him, Ray. And ever since, every time he pushes his brain too hard, every time he gets overwhelmed by these patterns, I see him back in that hospital bed, burning up from the inside. I sit in silence, absorbing the weight of his fear. It's not just abstract worry. It's the trauma of a father who's watched his child teeter on the edge of death. After Maria died," David continues, referring to his late wife, "Toby became everything, and I promised her I'd keep him safe." He picks up the notebook again, fingers tracing the equations as if they're a language he's desperate to understand. But how do I protect him from his own mind? The question hangs in the air between us, unanswerable. Outside, a distant siren wails, a sound that for David has always meant rushing toward danger, not away from it. "I can't pull him out now," I say finally, choosing my words with care. "These patterns, they're part of him. He's seeing them whether we want him to or not. Stopping the investigation won't stop his mind from working." "But it would stop him from being exposed to more trauma," David counters. "More crime scenes, more details about arson and murder." "Would it?" I challenge gently. "Or would he just keep working the pattern on his own, without guidance, without context?" I lean forward, meeting his gaze. "Dave, he predicted the next target. Bennett Insurance, 5 days from now. If we're right, people could die. Can you imagine what that would do to him, knowing he could have prevented it?" David's jaw tightens. He knows this argument too well, the impossible weight of lives that could have been saved. It's the burden every first responder carries. "I promise you," I continue, my voice steady, "I will not put him in danger. No more crime scenes, no direct involvement in whatever happens next. But we need his insights, his patterns, his way of seeing what the rest of us can't." The clock on the mantel ticks away seconds that feel stretched and distorted. Finally, David sets the notebook down and stands, moving to the window. His reflection in the glass looks ghostly, insubstantial. "When Maria was dying," he says quietly, "she made me promise something else. She said, 'Don't let him disappear into those numbers, David. Don't let him hide from the world behind equations.'" He turns to face me. Sometimes I think that's exactly what's happening, that I'm failing her. Or maybe, I suggest, this is his way of connecting with the world, using his gift to help others, to make a difference. A sound from the staircase draws our attention. Toby stands there in pajamas printed with the periodic table, his hair mussed from restless sleep, his eyes alert behind his glasses. "I calculated a 97% probability that you would argue," he says matter-of-factly. "Dad would be protective. Ray would be persuasive. The outcome was harder to predict." David moves to him immediately. "You should be in bed, buddy." "I heard sirens," Toby says, his gaze moving to me. "Did something happen? Another fire?" "No," I assure him quickly. "Everything's fine. Your dad and I were just talking." Toby nods, not quite believing me. "The pattern is still unfolding, with or without our intervention." He says it simply, a statement of mathematical certainty. David places a hand gently on his son's shoulder. The touch seems to ground them both. "Back to bed, Toby. We'll talk in the morning." Toby hesitates, then nods, his analytical mind visibly calculating the benefits of arguing versus compliance. "The variables require more processing," he concedes finally, then turns to me. "Ray, the 16-5-23 marking, I've been thinking about it. It might not just be a date. It could be coordinates within a larger sequence. We'll figure it out tomorrow, I promise. Get some rest. After Toby disappears back upstairs, David and I stand in silence for a long moment. The anger has drained from him, replaced by a resignation that somehow feels heavier. If anything happens to him, David says finally, his voice low and controlled, if this breaks him in ways I can't fix, that's on you, Ray. Not the case, not Bennett Insurance. You. I meet his gaze directly. I know, and I promise you, Dave, Toby's safety comes first. Before the case, before justice, before anything. He studies my face, searching for uncertainty or deception, finding neither. Finally, he nods. Not acceptance, exactly, but acknowledgement of terms. As I leave the Chen house, the weight of my promise follows me like a shadow. In the quiet darkness of my car, I wonder if it's a promise I can truly keep. The pattern is unfolding, as Toby said, and patterns, once set in motion, have a terrible momentum of their own. Bennett Insurance Group occupies the top 5 floors of a glass tower that cuts into the evening sky like a surgeon's scalpel. Precise, expensive, and designed to slice through problems with clinical efficiency. The lobby is all polished marble and indirect lighting, the kind of corporate cathedral where human voices instinctively drop to whispers. Toby shouldn't be here. I promised David, made solemn vows about keeping his son away from danger. But when the boy showed up at my office an hour ago, eyes wide with panic, insisting that today was the day, not 5 days from now, I made a choice I'll probably regret for the rest of my life. I brought him with me. Remember, I tell him as the elevator climbs smoothly toward the executive floor, you're just observing, no speaking unless I signal you, and if anything feels wrong, we leave immediately, Toby finishes, his eyes fixed on the changing floor numbers. 16 is black, he murmurs, always black. Like a void that consumes light. I've called in every favor I had left to get this meeting. An old client who sits on an insurance regulatory board, a cousin of Lopez's who works in corporate compliance. The kind of connections that get you 15 minutes with a CEO but leave you owing debts you can't easily repay. The elevator doors slide open to reveal an expansive reception area where everything seems designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings, abstract art with price tags that could buy small houses, furniture that manages to look both pristine and uncomfortable. A receptionist with a smile as polished as the marble floor leads us down a hushed hallway to Bennett's office. Arthur Bennett rises from behind a desk the size of a small boat when we enter. He's tall, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that comes from weekend sailing rather than actual work. His suit costs more than my monthly rent, a subtle armor of tailored fabric and status. Mr. Marshall, he says, extending a hand. His grip is firm but controlled like everything else about him. And this must be your nephew, was it? Consultant, I correct, feeling Toby tense slightly beside me. He has a particular insight into structural analysis. Bennett's smile doesn't waver, but something in his eyes shifts, a brief calculation of risk. How fascinating. Please, have a seat. We settle into chairs across from his desk. Behind Bennett, floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic view of the city below, buildings catching the last golden light of evening. The room smells of leather and something else, a subtle cologne that probably costs more per ounce than good whiskey. I understand you have questions about some of our claim settlements, Bennett says, folding his hands on the desk. Though I must say it's unusual to field such inquiries from a private investigator rather than our regulatory compliance team. I'm investigating a pattern, I reply, watching his face carefully. 3 fires in the past month, all with suspicious origins, all involving properties with Bennett insurance policies. Bennett's expression remains pleasantly neutral. We insure over 60% of the commercial properties in this area, Mr. Marshall. Statistically speaking, most fires would involve our policies. These weren't just any fires, I press. The warehouse on Fulton Street, the Meridian Insurance Office, and the East Side Storage Facility. All suffered total losses, all received expedited claim settlements, and all had their claims personally approved by your office. A subtle tightening around Bennett's eyes is the only indication that I've struck a nerve. As CEO, I review all high-value claims. It's simply good business practice. Toby shifts in his seat beside me. I can feel his agitation building, the way his fingers tap silently against his leg. Not anxiety, but calculation. His eyes keep darting to a leather-bound ledger on Bennett's desk, embossed with the company logo in gold. Is it also good business practice to approve claims without thorough fire investigation? I ask, sliding photos of the storage facility markings across the desk. Or to destroy evidence that might suggest these fires were deliberate? Bennett glances at the photos without touching them, his manicured hands remaining perfectly still on the desk. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Marshall, but it sounds dangerously close to accusation without evidence. I'm not implying anything, I say. I'm stating that the same pattern of accelerant use, burn spread, and targeted document destruction appears in these 3 fires. And this pattern bears a remarkable similarity to a fire 15 years ago. The Bridges case. At the mention of Bridges, something flickers across Bennett's face, so brief I almost miss it. Not guilt or fear, but annoyance, as if I've mentioned an administrative error rather than the death of a family. Ah, yes, the Bridges fire, a tragic accident, Bennett says, his voice modulated to express appropriate sympathy. As I recall, the investigation found no evidence of foul play. Investigations can be wrong, I reply, especially when key evidence disappears. Bennett leans back slightly, studying me with new interest. You were involved in that case, weren't you, before your departure from the police force? The subtle emphasis on departure is a reminder that he's done his homework on me. Some might say you've become fixated on a case that was resolved long ago. Before I can respond, Toby makes a small, distressed sound. His eyes are locked on Bennett's ledger, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Toby? I say quietly, alarmed by the sudden change. The numbers are wrong, he whispers, his voice tight with distress. They're not just insurance calculations, they're— He trails off, his hands now pressed against his temples as if trying to hold something in or keep something out. Bennett's gaze shifts to Toby, assessing him with cold curiosity. Your young consultant seems upset, Mr. Marshall. Perhaps this environment is too stimulating for him. I ignore Bennett, focusing on Toby. What do you see? Toby points a trembling finger at the ledger. Coordinates, ages, values, not buildings, people. His voice rises slightly, taking on the distant quality it gets when he's processing patterns too complex to easily articulate. The fires are just the surface. Underneath is a different pattern. Children who disappeared, each one assigned a numerical value. Bennett's composure slips for just a moment, a micro-expression of alarm quickly masked by practiced control. He slides the ledger away from Toby's line of sight, tucking it into a drawer with deliberate casualness. I'm afraid your young friend is becoming quite hysterical, Bennett says, his voice harder now, the corporate veneer thinning. Perhaps we should conclude this meeting. But Toby is fully immersed in the pattern now, his words tumbling out faster. 7 missing children in the last decade, each disappearance preceded by a fire that destroyed records. The Bridges children were the first, but not the last. The pattern repeats every 14 to 17 months. Bennett stands abruptly, pressing a button on his desk. "This has become inappropriate. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I rise as well, placing a protective hand near Toby without touching him. "What's in that ledger, Bennett?" "Financial records," he replies smoothly, though his eyes have gone flat and cold as winter ice. "Nothing that would interest a private investigator or a disturbed child. Red 3, blue 7, gold 5, black 16, Toby recites, his eyes squeezed shut now. "It's not just about destroying evidence. The fire is a cover for something else, something happening on the 16th floor tonight." His eyes fly open suddenly, focusing on Bennett with unnerving intensity. "There's a child here, in this building, right now." The door opens behind us as security responds to Bennett's call. Two men in dark suits enter silently, their posture making it clear they're not simply receptionists. "Please escort Mr. Marshall and his young friend out," Bennett says pleasantly. "They seem to be confused about the purpose of our meeting." I keep my hand near Toby as we're firmly guided toward the door, but my mind is racing through the implications of his words, not just arson for insurance fraud, but something far darker. Children, disappearances, a pattern stretching back 15 years. At the threshold, I turn back to Bennett. This isn't over. His smile never reaches his eyes. "I believe it is, Mr. Marshall, and I'd advise against spreading unfounded accusations about Bennett Insurance. Our legal team is quite thorough in addressing defamation." In the elevator descending from the 16th floor, Toby's trembling subsides slightly. His eyes focus on the numbers as we drop, 15, 14, 13, each illuminated button counting down our escape. "There's a child in danger," he whispers. "Tonight, not 5 days from now. The pattern changed when we started investigating. They're accelerating their plan." I pull out my phone, dialing Lopez. "We need to get David," I tell Toby, "and then we need to convince Lopez that this is happening now." "She won't believe us," Toby says with mathematical certainty. "The evidence is circumstantial. Numerical patterns aren't admissible." The elevator reaches the lobby, doors sliding open to the cold marble cathedral of corporate power. As we step out, my phone goes straight to Lopez's voicemail. "Then we'll need to find evidence she can't ignore," I say, guiding Toby toward the exit. "And we need to do it tonight." Behind us, the Bennett Insurance Tower gleams in the deepening twilight, its windows reflecting the last light of day. A perfect facade hiding whatever darkness Toby has glimpsed within its mathematical patterns. Whatever is happening on the 16th floor, we have hours, not days, to stop it. The pattern has changed. The countdown has begun. My office feels like a bomb shelter tonight. One lamp burning against the darkness, the walls closing in as Toby works at my desk, his pencil flying across page after page with the desperate precision of someone decoding messages from another world. The boy hasn't spoken in 20 minutes, not since he spread out his notebooks and began reconstructing what he saw in Bennett's ledger. David stands by the window, his firefighter's instinct to run toward danger visibly warring with his father's need to protect his son from the horror unfolding in those numbers. "You're sure he memorized it?" David asks for the third time, his voice low and tight. "In just those few seconds?" I nod, watching Toby's hand move across the paper, creating constellations of digits and symbols. He has a photographic memory for patterns. Said he captured 4 pages while Bennett was talking to me. David rubs his face, exhaustion etched into every line. I called him the moment we left Bennett Insurance, the words tumbling out in a rush. Children, disappearances tonight. He met us here in record time, still in his uniform, smelling faintly of smoke from a call earlier today. The irony doesn't escape me. A firefighter racing to understand fires set by monsters wearing business suits. What exactly did he see in that ledger? David asks, moving closer to his son, but careful not to interrupt his concentration. I don't know yet, I admit, just that it wasn't normal accounting. Something about coordinates, ages, values. Bennett's reaction when Toby mentioned it was telling. Outside, rain has started again, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. The clock on my wall reads 8:17 p.m. If Toby is right, and I've learned not to doubt him, whatever is happening at Bennett Insurance will unfold in just a few hours. Suddenly Toby makes a small, distressed sound. His pencil stops mid-equation. Toby? David moves to his side instantly, parental concern overriding everything else. It's worse than I thought, Toby whispers, his eyes fixed on the page before him. The numbers aren't just tracking the fires, they're tracking children. His voice cracks slightly on the last word. I pull my chair closer, studying the pages covered in Toby's precise handwriting. To me, they're just numbers, coordinates, dates, a mathematical language I can't begin to decipher. But to Toby, they tell a story of calculated evil. What children? I ask gently. The missing ones you mentioned at Bennett's office? Toby nods, his fingers tracing patterns on the page that only he can see. 7 children over 10 years. Each one has a numerical designation in the ledger, assigned values based on age, appearance, and— He swallows hard. Marketability. David's face drains of color. Jesus Christ. The fires are smoke screens, Toby continues, his voice taking on that distant quality it gets when he's translating patterns into words. Each one destroys records that might connect Bennett to the children, but they also serve another purpose: distraction. Emergency services focused on one part of the city while they— He trails off, unable to complete the thought. While they take another child, I finish, feeling cold despite the stuffiness of my small office. Toby nods, then turns to a fresh page in his notebook. His hand moves with renewed urgency, drawing a map of the city with precise lines and measurements. The pattern forms a spiral. Each abduction point moves inward, following the golden ratio. The fires create the outer spiral. The abductions form the inner spiral. Mathematically perfect. The pieces click together in my mind, forming a picture so dark I almost wish I couldn't see it. Bennett Insurance. They're not just committing fraud. They're running some kind of trafficking operation. High-end, Toby says, his clinical precision somehow making it more horrifying. The numerical values assigned to each child correspond to insurance payouts that far exceed property values. The money isn't for the fires, it's for the children. David makes a sound like he's been struck. He steps away, turning his back to us, his shoulders rigid with tension. I can see him struggling to contain his rage, to maintain control for Toby's sake. The Bridges children, I say softly, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They were the first, weren't they? Toby looks up at me, his eyes magnified behind his glasses, somehow both childlike and ancient. Yes, Jacob Bridges wasn't just a witness in an insurance fraud case. He discovered something about the company, something involving children. They killed the whole family to silence him, but they took the children first. Made it look like they died in the fire. My hands are numb, but I feel a warmth in my chest, an uncomfortable heat that I recognize as guilt. For 15 years, I've carried the Bridges case like a stone in my pocket, believing I failed to prove it was arson. The truth is so much worse. I didn't just fail to prove a crime, I failed to see its true scope. And tonight? David asks, turning back to us, his voice strained but controlled. You said there's a child in danger tonight? Toby points to a spot on his map. an address in the warehouse district not far from Bennett Insurance. Here, the ledger had today's date marked with a new numerical designation, a new acquisition. The clinical term seems to cause him physical pain. A 12-year-old, the same age as Toby. No wonder the pattern affected him so deeply. We need to call Lopez, I say, reaching for my phone. Show her what you've found. Toby shakes his head. The mathematical correlations won't be enough for a warrant. We need the actual ledger. He looks up at me, a determination in his eyes that seems to age him 10 years. We need to get back into Bennett Insurance. Absolutely not, David says immediately. You're not going anywhere near that building again. I don't need to, Toby replies, turning to a new page. But Ray does, and Detective Lopez. The ledger is in Bennett's office, third drawer of his desk, locked with a 6-digit combination. His pencil moves swiftly, diagramming the office layout from memory. The combination will be based on the same mathematical sequence as the fires and abductions. I can calculate it. I watch him work. This extraordinary child who sees patterns that have hidden monstrous crimes for years. In his numbers, in his colors, he's uncovered a network of evil that all the conventional detective work in the world might never have revealed. Even if we get the ledger, I say, Bennett will deny everything. Say it's been tampered with. His word against ours. No, Toby says with quiet certainty. Because tonight isn't just about acquiring a new child. It's about transport. The ledger has shipping codes, destination coordinates, multiple children moving through the warehouse at once. He looks up, his expression grave beyond his years. If you stop it tonight, you'll find not just the new victim, but others. Evidence that can't be denied. I reach for my phone again, dialing Lopez's number. This time, she answers on the second ring. I need you to meet me, I say without preamble. We've got something on Bennett, something big. As I give her the address to my office, I watch Toby continue his calculations, David standing guard beside him like a sentinel. The boy who sees numbers as colors has revealed a darkness that was hiding in plain sight. Encoded in ledgers, buried in mathematical patterns that seem too complex to decipher. Tonight, those numbers might finally tell a truth that can no longer be ignored. The warehouse looms against the midnight sky like a monument to forgotten commerce, its windows dark except for a single light on the second floor. Lopez crouches beside me behind a stack of shipping containers, her service weapon held low against her thigh, her face set in that mask of professional detachment cops wear when their insides are churning. The radio on her belt crackles softly. Backup units positioning themselves around the perimeter, silent and invisible in the darkness. David waits in the car across the street, against his protests. Close enough to help, I'd told him, far enough to maintain deniability. A compromise neither of us likes, but both of us can live with. You sure about this, Marshal? Lopez whispers, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. If we're wrong, we're not wrong, I say, more certainty in my voice than I actually feel. Trusting the calculations of a 12-year-old boy with this much on the line seems like madness, but I've stopped questioning Toby's patterns. Southeast entrance, second floor, third door on the right, exactly where he said it would be. Lopez nods once, sharp and decisive. She didn't believe us at first. Who would? But Toby's precise prediction of a financial transaction linked to tonight's operation, which she verified through emergency subpoenas, was enough to convince her superiors to authorize this raid. Exigent circumstances, imminent danger to a minor, the legal phrases that allow cops to kick down doors first and fill out paperwork later. Alpha team in position, crackles the radio. Bravo team ready. No movement visible at the south entrance. Lopez raises the radio to her lips. Hold positions. We move on my signal. She glances at me, her dark eyes reflecting pinpoints of distant streetlights. "Stay behind me, Marshal. This isn't a PI's playground. Wouldn't dream of getting ahead of you," I reply, checking the weight of my own weapon, a reassurance I hope I won't need. We move across the open ground between the containers and the warehouse in short, controlled bursts, using shadows as cover. The chain-link fence has already been cut by the advance team, a neat surgical opening just wide enough for us to slip through. The side door is exactly where Toby's diagram showed it would be, unalarmed and secured with a simple padlock that Lopez's team has already dealt with. Inside, the darkness is nearly complete. The warehouse smells of motor oil, damp concrete, and something else. A chemical sweetness that raises the hair on the back of my neck. Our flashlights cut narrow paths through the gloom, revealing dusty machinery and stacks of wooden pallets. We move in practiced formation, Lopez leading, me following, 2 officers covering our flanks. The stairs to the second floor creak despite our careful steps. At the top landing, Lopez pauses, holding up a closed fist. Wait. From behind a door at the end of the hallway comes the low murmur of voices. A man laughs, the sound jarring in the tense silence. Lopez signals the team to move forward, each step measured and silent. The numbered doors match Toby's description perfectly. 1, 2, and then 3. The third door on the right, where Toby calculated the processing would happen. The clinical term for what they do to children before shipping them to God knows where. Lopez positions herself beside the door, signaling the count with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The door crashes inward under the boot of the officer behind her, and suddenly the narrow hallway explodes with movement and shouted commands. "Police! Hands where I can see them! Down on the ground, now!" I follow them in, staying to the rear as promised. The room is larger than expected, industrial lights hanging from exposed beams casting harsh shadows. 3 men in expensive suits freeze in various positions around a desk covered with papers and a laptop. One of them is Arthur Bennett, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, his face a mask of calculated outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" he demands, directing his indignation at Lopez. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Arthur Bennett," Lopez replies, her gun steady in her hands. "And yes, I know exactly who you are and what you're doing here." As her officers secure the other men, my attention shifts to a door at the back of the room, metal with a keypad lock. Toby's voice echoes in my memory. "The children will be kept separate from the processing area. Security measures to prevent witnesses." I move toward it, ignoring Bennett's continued protests about lawyers and police overreach. The keypad has a 6-digit display. Without hesitation, I punch in the sequence Toby calculated, a specific iteration of the golden ratio, modified by Bennett's birth date. The lock clicks open. "Lopez," I call, my voice tight. "Over here." She joins me, weapons still trained on Bennett, with one hand, as she uses the other to push the door fully open. The room beyond is small, windowless, with bare walls and floor except for a single camera mounted in the corner. 5 children sit huddled together on thin mattresses, 3 boys and 2 girls, ranging from perhaps 8 to 14 years old. Their eyes are wide with fear, but none of them make a sound. Trained into silence, perhaps, or simply too terrified to speak. Among them is a small boy with sandy hair who can't be older than 12, today's acquisition, according to Toby's calculations. "Call in medical," Lopez says into her radio, her professional detachment cracking for just a moment. "And get CPS here, now." When she turns back to Bennett, her expression has hardened into something dangerous. "Arthur Bennett, you're under arrest for kidnapping, human trafficking, criminal conspiracy." "This is absurd," Bennett interrupts. though some of the arrogant certainty has leached from his voice. "I have no idea who these children are or how they got here. This building isn't even registered to me." "No," I say, stepping forward. "It's registered to a shell company owned by a subsidiary of Bennett Insurance, just like the warehouse on Fulton and the storage facility that burned last week." I pull a folded paper from my pocket. Toby's diagram of the entire operation, connecting fires, properties, and abductions in a perfect mathematical sequence. "Your pattern, Bennett, perfect in its precision. Too perfect, as it turns out." "Patterns?" Bennett scoffs, but there's fear in his eyes now. "What nonsense is this? The same pattern that connects you to 7 abductions over 10 years, Lopez continues, picking up the thread, "including the Bridges children who didn't die in that fire after all." Bennett's face goes slack with shock, then quickly recalibrates. "You can't prove any connection between me and these unfortunate children. Certainly not from some hand-drawn diagram." "Maybe not," Lopez agrees, nodding to one of her officers who approaches with Bennett's laptop. "But I'm betting the contents of this computer will, and those files over there, and the statements of your associates once they realize the penalties for trafficking minors." As if on cue, one of the other suited men, younger, with sweat beading on his forehead, speaks up. "I want a deal. I'll tell you everything about the operation. Bennett's been running it for years." Bennett's composure cracks entirely. "Shut your mouth, you fool." But it's too late. The dominoes are falling, just as Toby predicted they would. The mathematical certainty of betrayal when the cost of loyalty becomes too high. Outside the room, I hear more police arriving, the controlled chaos of a major bust in progress. David will be worried, waiting in the car, perhaps already breaking our agreement to stay put. I should go tell him we've succeeded, that the children are safe, that his son's gift has saved lives tonight. Instead, I stay to watch as Lopez cuffs Bennett, reciting his rights in a voice cold with controlled fury. Bennett's eyes find mine over her shoulder, hatred burning in them with mathematical precision. "How?" he demands. "How did you put it together?" I think of Toby, of his colored numbers and precise calculations, of patterns that revealed monsters hiding in plain sight. "Some people see more clearly than others," I tell him simply. "Some minds can't be deceived by your smoke and mirrors." As they lead Bennett away, I move to the room where the children wait, still silent, still watching with those 2 old eyes. Tonight is just the beginning for them. Statements, hospitals, the long road of healing from whatever they've endured. But they're alive and they're found, and the men who took them will answer for their crimes. All because a boy who sees the world through numbers and colors refused to look away from the patterns others couldn't or wouldn't see. Dawn breaks over the Chen house like a gentle apology for the night that preceded it. I sit on the porch steps, nursing a cup of coffee that David pressed into my hands when I arrived 20 minutes ago, too wired to sleep despite 36 hours of continuous wakefulness. The sky shifts from charcoal to lavender to a pale, hesitant blue, colors that Toby would probably assign numbers to if he were observing them. As if summoned by my thoughts, the screen door creaks open behind me, and he appears, hair tousled from what was likely a restless sleep, glasses slightly askew on his face. He doesn't speak at first, just settles beside me on the step, careful to maintain precisely 2 inches of space between us. His hands rest on his knees, fingers tapping out some silent equation. His way of processing the world when it becomes too chaotic to bear. "Lopez called an hour ago," I tell him, breaking the comfortable silence. "Bennett's already trying to cut a deal. 2 of his associates are competing to see who can confess fastest." Toby nods, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun is beginning to burn away the morning mist. "Mathematically predictable." Self-preservation follows the same patterns as everything else. The children are safe, I continue, all of them, including 2 who match the DNA of the Bridges family. I still can't quite believe it. The answer to a 15-year-old mystery hidden in plain sight all this time. Your calculations were perfect, Toby. Every coordinate, every detail. He absorbs this information with the same careful consideration he gives to all data points, neither celebrating nor dismissing the compliment. After a moment, he asks a question that catches me off guard with its directness. Will my numbers ever stop showing me things like this? The question hangs in the cool morning air between us. I study his profile, so young, yet carrying the weight of patterns and truths that most adults spend their lives avoiding. How do you answer a child who sees too much, knows too much? I don't know, I admit finally. Gifts like yours, they don't come with instruction manuals. It doesn't feel like a gift sometimes, he says quietly, his fingers still moving in their private dance of calculation. Dad says I should be proud that my numbers helped save those children, but I keep thinking about all the patterns I didn't see sooner. All the children before them. I understand his burden more than he knows. How many cases did I abandon because the evidence wasn't clear enough? How many people suffered because I couldn't connect dots that seemed too far apart? The Bridges case haunted me for 15 years, I tell him. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Couldn't see the complete pattern. I take a sip of my now cold coffee. That's the thing about looking for truth, Toby. You can't always find it when you want to, and once you find it, you can't unsee it. The screen door opens again, and David emerges, bringing the smell of bacon and pancakes with him. He looks exhausted but centered, the wild fear that had gripped him during the investigation now replaced by a quiet vigilance. "Breakfast in 10, he says, resting a hand briefly on Toby's shoulder, a touch so light it barely disturbs the air, calibrated perfectly to provide connection without overwhelming his son's senses. "Thank you," I say, meaning it for more than just breakfast, for trusting me with his son's gift when every parental instinct must have screamed against it. David nods, understanding the deeper gratitude. "The house is full of reporters," he says with a slight grimace. "Called 3 times already this morning. Apparently breaking up an international trafficking ring makes for good headlines. We don't have to talk to them," I assure Toby quickly, seeing his fingers accelerate their tapping. "Lopez will handle the official statements. They'll want to know how we found the children," Toby says, a hint of anxiety in his voice. "How I knew, and we'll tell them exactly nothing," David says firmly. "Your gift isn't for public consumption, buddy." He goes back inside, leaving us in the gentle morning light. A pair of cardinals lands on the feeder hanging from the porch eaves, bright splashes of red against the pale sky. "Will they be okay?" Toby asks suddenly. "The children." It's a question without a mathematical answer, the kind that Toby struggles with most. I choose my words carefully. "Recovery isn't linear," I say. "It doesn't follow clean patterns or predictable sequences. But yes, I think they'll be okay, eventually. They're young, and they have each other. Sometimes that's enough." Toby considers this, his head tilted slightly as he processes the uncertainty. "The Bridges children were held for 15 years, he says. That's 5,175 days. The trauma can't be calculated with simple equations." "No," I agree. "Some things can't be reduced to numbers, even for you." He's quiet for a long moment, watching the cardinals flit from the feeder to a nearby branch and back again. "I've been thinking about a different kind of pattern," he says finally. "Not fires or abductions or trauma." "What kind of pattern?" "Healing," he says, the word sounding almost experimental on his tongue. "I've been calculating the variables for recovery. support systems, therapeutic interventions, neuroplasticity rates in developing brains. His fingers slow their tapping. The numbers are more hopeful than I expected. Something tightens in my chest. Not guilt this time, but an emotion more complex and tender. This extraordinary child, who sees darkness with such clarity, is now trying to calculate paths toward light. Sometimes, I tell him, numbers tell us things we don't want to know, but always need to hear. That's the burden of seeing clearly in a world where most people prefer comfortable blindness. He turns to look at me then, actually meeting my eyes for one of the rare moments since I've known him. Is that why you kept investigating when no one believed you? Because you saw things clearly? No, I admit. I kept investigating because I couldn't see clearly enough, and it haunted me. You're the one who sees clearly, Toby. I just refused to look away. Our fingers brush accidentally as he shifts position, and we both feel a spark, static from the dry morning air, but it jolts us nonetheless. A small, tangible connection between two people who carry the weight of difficult truths. Dad says knowledge is neutral, Toby says. It's what we do with it that matters. Your dad's a wise man. The sun clears the horizon fully now, washing the porch in golden light. Inside, we can hear David moving around the kitchen, the mundane sounds of a normal morning reclaiming its rightful place after the darkness of the previous night. I don't think my numbers will stop showing me painful truths, Toby says, answering his own earlier question. But maybe they can also show me how to help. That's a different kind of pattern, a better one. I look at this remarkable boy who sees the world as colors and numbers and patterns that most of us will never comprehend, who used his extraordinary gift not to withdraw from the world's ugliness, but to illuminate it so it could be healed. That, I tell him with absolute certainty, is the best kind of pattern there is. As David calls us in for breakfast, Toby stands with that careful precision that characterizes all his movements. For just a moment he pauses, looking back at me. Thank you, he says simply, for believing the numbers. He disappears inside, leaving me on the porch with the rising sun and the knowledge that some gifts, no matter how heavy, are worth the weight they ask us to bear, especially when they lead us to truths that might otherwise remain forever hidden in plain sight.